Here's a video of Alex O'Connor doing a miserable job at refuting the PMC argument against God. I previously made a video elaborating on the PMC argument. If you want to see that, click here. Now, Joe Schmid does a decent job at shutting down Alex O'Connor's miserable objections to the argument, but ultimately he was far too agreeable to put Alex O'Connor in his place. And that's why I'm here. Also, Joe Schmid does a lot of unnecessary rambling, so I'm going to be putting their conversation on faster speed.
Okay, sounds good. So yeah, the first one that we want to cover is the argument from material causality. And so this is actually from philosopher Felipe Leon himself and his article, The Problem of Creation Ex Nihilo, a New Argument Against Classical Theism. And the argument, I mean, you could run it in different ways, but here's a standard kind of two-premise conclusion style argument. So the first premise is that every material thing with an originating or sustaining cause has a material cause, in the sense of some things or stuff from which it is made. The second premise is that if traditional theism is true, well then the universe is a material thing with an originating or sustaining cause, but no material cause. So then the conclusion follows that traditional theism is false. So on behalf of that premise one, which he calls the principle of material causality, again, the principle of material causality, or premise one, it says that every material thing with an originating or sustaining cause has a material cause in the sense of some things or stuff from which it's made. On behalf of that premise, he points out that actually a lot of the motivations for this premise are strikingly similar to the motivations that theists give for the causal principle at play in the Kalam cosmological argument, that everything that begins to exist has a cause. So more specifically, I'll just mention two here, but there are more that he goes through in the paper. More specifically, it seems to be an outstandingly well-confirmed principle. Everywhere we look, we have very strong inductive grounds for accepting it. Just like everywhere we look, every beginning that we see has a cause that produced it. Likewise, everything that we see which has an originating or sustaining cause, so for instance, my cup, it was brought into existence, it has an originating cause, we find it to have a material cause as well. It was made out of various materials that were refashioned and shaped into it in some manner. It was made from that sort of pre-existent stuff, or things or stuff. And similarly, a flame, which you might think has a sustaining cause in terms of the oxygen and whatnot, the oxygen there is the stuff from which, or out of which, it's sort of being used up in order to cause the combustion, right? So it's a sort of a material cause that undergirds it. So then the principle is outstandingly well confirmed. Our universal experience attests to it, and so we have very strong inductive grounds for accepting it. And I guess the second reason is that, a lot of people argue that just the Kalam's causal principle is just really intuitively plausible, it just seems intuitive that if, if something began to exist, then something should have produced it. Likewise, Felipe Leon argues that it just seems really intuitive that if a material thing begins to exist, or it's being sustained in being or whatever, it just seems plausible that it would have some things or stuff from which it's made. If just as you wouldn't take seriously someone saying that, their log cabin in the woods just popped into existence uncaused, you also wouldn't take seriously that, they kind of made it appear, but they didn't make it out of any materials or anything like that. They didn't make it from anything. They just said they just breathed let there be a cabin, boom, it just pops there or something. We wouldn't take that seriously. And so it does seem intuitively plausible that material things come from, when they have a cause, they come from some prior things or stuff. But of course, if traditional theism is true, then the universe can't be created from some prior things or stuff. God creates it ex nihilo if traditional theism is true. There's no prior stuff that God could refashion in order to bring about the universe. So then we get the conclusion that traditional theism is false. And again, there are more motivations for that principle of material causality, but that is the argument.
If, like me, you appreciate concision, two of the four motivations for PMC are inductive generalization from our experience and two, the intuitive appeal of the principle.
Yeah, intuitive, immediately, I mean to say, I feel like to sort of argue from the fact that everything we sort of see materially has some kind of material cause, that material itself, the whole edifice, would have some kind of material cause, I think might just be a kind of category error. We're talking about a different kind of event. We're talking about a beginning rather than a continuation of processes that were once begun. It just seems to me really easy to say.
So it's certainly not a category error. Does he not know what a category error is? A category error is logical inapplicability given a distinction between two categories. Example, saying the number 5 is hungry. Logically inapplicable. But an erroneous application of one things to another is not the same as and does not entail category error. What are you talking about? So at best, even if it were true that PMC, because it's formed within the universe, that therefore its motivations don't warrant its applicability to the universe, it doesn't mean it's a category error if one were to attempt to or suggest that it can be applied. This is more of a nitpick. However, the actual point he's making is still utterly inept. What's the actual point he's making and why is it inept? First of all, he has not cited a relevant category distinction. Therefore, absent reason to think there is one, to suggest that what happens in the universe can't be applied to the universe, that suggestion suffers from internal probabilistic tension, not explaining don't feel like it. Second, even if it were true that you can't apply PMC to the universe for the exact reason he cited, that itself would motivate the very conclusion of the argument that PMC is contained in. How? What's the conclusion? Conclusion is classical theism is false. If the reason cited undercuts PMC, it undercuts the need for efficient causation, which entails classical theism is false. So his objection is wrong on a semantic account, it's not a category error. The content of his objection is erroneous, it doesn't follow. In fact, we have good reason to think it doesn't follow, that what happens in the universe can't apply to the universe because of internal probabilistic tension. Absent relevant category distinction, he doesn't make one. And third, even if we grant his semantically confused, internally improbable suggestion that lacked any motivation, it would still motivate the conclusion that he's trying to avoid. Good Lord! Get out of here, Alex.
Like the beginning of the existence of everything is like just a totally different kind of event to like the way that stuff that exists then goes on to interact. Like, you know, if you're a mereological nihilist, you might think, well, your cup never began to exist. It's just sort of like everything that began to exist at one point. Like, boom, there it all is, all this stuff, all these subatomic particles, and since then stuff's just being rearranged and bumping into each other and changing from energy into matter and matter to energy and covalent bonds and all this kind of stuff. But it's all just the same stuff moving around. Like this event where it all comes into being is like a totally different kind of event. Like that seems like a really easy move for me to make here.
So, one thing to say is that if that move succeeds here, it would also plausibly succeed in the case of the Kalam. And in fact, you yourself have brought up this point in the context of motivations for the Kalam's causal principle, right? So
Yes.
I think that theists need to be cautious if they're going to be using this argument, and if they also want to accept the Kalam, or if they want to, use your objection here, and if they also want to accept the Kalam, because it's equally open to say, the beginning of everything is just so radically different from the various alleged beginnings that we see in our experience. And if you bring in mereological nihilism, it changes changes the scene. So anyway, I just want to caution that at least many theists are not going to want to take that move. That's one thing to say, and then a second thing to say, and the second thing to say is probably just that whenever we have an inductive generalization, you can always bring up that, like, well, hey, maybe the unobserved cases are like different in some way. You can always say that. All the emeralds that we've ever seen are green, but like maybe there's an emerald that is unseen and it's existing in. Maybe emerald is bad because maybe an emerald is defined as being green. But like whatever.
I know what you mean.
In like a mountain, somewhere in a deep cave, we know that there are emeralds, but they've never been observed. Someone says like, well, like maybe conditions are different there or something, and like maybe they're not going to be green. It's like, okay, listen, we grant that maybe maybe that's the case, but like if we want to defeat the inductive generalization and we want to defeat our justification for thinking that they will probably be green, we need to be given some independent reason to think that they're actually not going to be green. We need to be given some positive grounds. And so similarly, we would need to be given some positive grounds for thinking that the universe is a material thing that has no material cause. And again, material cause it's not necessarily just like the material things that we find within the universe. As I define it, as Felipe Leon defines it, it's just some things or stuff from which the universe is made. So it could be it doesn't have to be like the material within the universe. I mean, not clearly the material within the universe couldn't be like the stuff from which the universe is made. But like this is where, theists, in principle, a theist actually might be able to accept the argument because they could believe in, for instance.
To nitpick two of the things Joe Schmidt is saying, because I love nitpicking. First, he said Alex needs to provide positive motivation for his claim that there's actually a relevant difference. However, it's more than that. It's not merely that Alex needs some reason. It's that Alex has to overcome all of the reason, all of the motivations in favor of PMC. He has to overcome all of them. So not only is it the case that when Alex suggests that there might be a relevant category distinction, not only is it the case that he lacks positive motivation for that claim, such that we should be agnostic, and it's not that he needs some motivation for that claim, so it could be motivated, it's that he needs sufficient motivation to overcome all of the reasons in favor of PMC. But Joe Schmidt says he needs some reason, which seems confused to me. It's not some, it's enough to outweigh all of the countervailing considerations, right? We have a lot of reason to think it's actively false what he's suggesting, right? Second thing I'm going to nitpick that Joe Schmidt said is that he said a theist in principle can accept the argument. Not a classical theist. The argument aims to show that classical theism is false. Most theists are classical theists, and even if he meant just generally atheist, Felipe gives reasons in his article against accepting the argument but proposing a theist-friendly alternative. So to say you could accept the argument when part of the argument is that you can't pose a theism-friendly alternative seems underspecified.
Panentheism, which holds that God makes the universe out of the resources of his own being. He sort of refashions himself in some way, or takes some of his own being, as it were, as if it's like, cookie dough or whatever, and then remolds it and fashions it in such a way as to make physical reality. That could also satisfy the principle of material causality, because it's the physical world is not sort of created ex nihilo, but it's coming from some refashioned pre-existent stuff, some causally prior stuff. So it wouldn't be able to. I'm circumventing an objection that the universe couldn't have material cause because material things are all within the universe. So anyway, I'll let you have the final word on this before we rank it, because we probably have to go.
I think on the inductive point there, like, well, you can always say with inductive things, like maybe this one's just different, but like, if you're talking about a bunch of emeralds and I say there's this emerald, maybe it's different. That does seem like something you can always do. But the beginning of the universe is like famously just like completely radical as an event. Like the laws of physics just completely break down. Like time just ceases to be a concept. Like matter is infinitely compressed into like unimaginable proportions. Like there are so many other ways in which this is such a different event to anything else we know. So I could make an inductive case, right? I could say, well, look, when it comes to time, the Big Bang is radically different from everything we observe and how it works in the universe. When it comes to space, the Big Bang is radically different from everything we observe and how space works, in the normal course of affairs, in terms of size, in terms of all this kind of stuff. And so inductively, this other property of like causation, I'm just going to say, must also be radically different from the way that it usually works in the universe as we know it right now. And what's one way it could be radically different? Well, maybe it's like this material condition sort of doesn't exist, right? It's like, I think that'd be a weird argument to make. It'd be a bad inductive argument, but it's not like I'm just taking a bunch of stuff that sort of begin to exist and saying, okay, I think my car began to exist, my shoes, my laptop, my chair, but not my computer monitor. No, that sort of pops into existence. I don't know. That's very different. You'd be like, well, why the hell do you think that? But if we're talking about something that is just so different in like every conceivable way, it doesn't seem that implausible to me that would give us at least room to hypothesize that it could be different here. So does it work as an argument for atheism? If you were saying it's for atheism, you would have to be making the claim that you know that the sort of causal principle.
Okay, that's enough unchecked confusion. First of all, no, to make the argument, you don't have to assert knowledge or like demonstrability, right? It's not inherent to the definition of argument that it be demonstrable. Tons of people make arguments for like, what? Okay, just what are you talking about? You don't need to know it. You don't need to claim to know it. You don't need to claim that your argument demonstrates knowledge of its conclusion. Okay? So that's just weird. Second, he listed a bunch of differences, but not relevant differences. So you haven't motivated your conclusion of the inapplicability of PMC. Third, we have more reasons to think PMC is true other than the inductive support. And Schmid Joe told that to you. Schmid Joe also told it to you that even if, well, he said it in this like Kalam style context, but Schmid alluded to the fact that even if the reason here cited, the suggestion here cited as motivation to undercut PMC works, it undercuts the need for efficient causation, which entails classical theism is false. So what are you talking about? You were told these things. It's not like someone just told you exclusively one motivation for PMC and stated that it was the only motivation and it was the inductive motivation. So yeah, no. Oh, and I watched this video once, like a month ago, and I think Joe Schmid is going to reply like, yeah, but you haven't said a relevant difference. Alex O'Connor's going to be like, oh, I think it's relevant. And I think Joe Schmid is going to be too polite, and he's not going to be like, sorry, buddy, you need to give, like, what are you doing? I think Joe Schmid is going to be like, yeah, like evidence is, or like reason for belief in something is like agent relative. Justification is person based. So you're right. This alludes to the very interesting nature of person based justification. Sure, justification is person based, but that doesn't mean you could be an idiot. Okay, so sometimes we become too charitable, such that our charitable reinterpretation of what someone's saying is so drastic that it's just no longer a reinterpretation of what they're saying, but rather it's an entirely constructed figment of your imagination. You're making up some idealized version of your opponent's objections that don't exist. You might as well discard him and argue with yourself at that point. Anyway.
Applies even to the Big Bang, the material causal principle. Like you're taking on a quite big claim for yourself and justifying it with what's probably a relatively, in my view, weak inductive claim about sort of the material goings on in the universe, which, as I say, is like this completely different kind of operation to something like the Big Bang. So to me, in terms of ranking, I think this is actually really quite low. But I don't know. You seem maybe a little bit more attracted to it than I do.
Yeah, I think it's a better argument than you think it is. That's not to say that I think it like succeeds in showing that God doesn't exist, but I do think it's a better argument than you might. Just because, firstly, there are lots of other justifications for the principle that Felipe Leon goes over in his article that I just we don't have time to cover. Secondly, I still think that it's not clear to me that we've been given like a kind of principled relevant difference between the beginning of the universe as such and other beginnings, which could account for why the former doesn't or couldn't have a material cause, whereas the latter could. Sure, there are lots of pretty radical differences, but it's not clear why they would be relevant to the principle of material causality, why they would be relevant to explaining the difference between them.
Lay it on him, boy. You tell him. Put him in his place. Put him down. Put him down. Tell him. Irrelevant. totally irrelevant, red herring, what the fuck are you talking about? There's no relation, there's no principled difference here, there's no categorical distinction. Shut your mouth, shut your fucking mouth, eh? Let's see how long Joe Schmidt's rationality could be upheld in the face of an appeal to the person-based nature of justification. The second that thing comes to his mind, the second he remembers that justification is person-based, oh my goodness, anyone could say anything. Anyone could say anything now. So let's just see how long he behaves till he just veers off path because he saw like a dog being thrown a bone off a trail. He saw or thought he saw the relevance of the person-based nature of justification. I'm being an asshole right now. This is totally, not totally. More or less what Joe Schmidt is doing is fine. I'm just having fun. But yeah, he's gotta. I really think he's gonna talk about person-based nature of justification if I recall correctly. And I've seen him do it in a lot of contexts where the opponent he was dealing with was being an idiot. And he was just like, oh, okay, I'll be nice. Person-based nature of justification, have fun. But like, no, come on, man. Come on, Joe.
So such that the principle of material causality applies to one and doesn't apply to the others. And then thirdly, like it's not just the inductive inference that supports it, but also like, the intuition and so on. So I would be inclined to rank it higher than you probably. But it's not like I mean it's clearly not like the problem of evil or something. So,
I would put it like, man, I was tempted to say I put it like God Rock territory, man. Like I'm seriously just like.
But listen, you also have to take one other thing that I forgot to mention. So sorry to interrupt, but one other thing that I forgot to mention is that like remember that like most theists are not going to want to take the route that you've responded with because again it's arguably going to require them to give up their principle, their Kalam causal principle, and their confidence that it applies also to the beginning of the universe, which also all your points will be applying in response to that. So
that's true, but then like what about the sort of the agnostic who's just sort of has no skin in the game and just says like, all right, tell me why there's no God, and you say, well, how like everything you've observed seems to have like a material cause. Yeah, sure. Well, like the whole edifice itself, the arena in which that material causation itself operates must itself therefore have a material cause. And I'm just like, well, why do you think that? Like, literally, what is your reason for thinking that? I don't think so. I'm not convinced. It just seems so easy for me to just, and the only thing you have in response to that seems to be something like, well, look, man, like it seems kind of inductive, like I don't know, like I don't see any like reason to believe it. You know what I mean? It just seems like it seems kind of strange to me. It just seems so easy for me. Like it doesn't trouble me at all.
And its dialectical efficacy may be different for different people, and this points to a general feature of arguments. Like they affect us differently because we come to arguments with different epistemic situations, with different plausibility structures, with different background evidence, with different background beliefs, and so on. And so this may be more convincing or more troubling for someone who, for instance, a theist who accepts the Kalam, compared to you or an agnostic or something like that. So I don't know. I think it has some. Okay. You'll probably argue we will have some dialectical efficacy. I'd be inclined to put it somewhere around maybe C tier. I know you probably want to put it lower, but
he's obviously not wrong that your prior beliefs affect the appeal of particular arguments. That's not wrong. However, it's not relevant here. That's not what's going on. What's not happening is that you have two people who are presented with an argument, and what differentiates the reaction to that argument. I'm just laughing because of how stupid Alex is being. It's not like we have two people, and what differentiates the reaction to an argument is their prior set of beliefs, and that's it. No, you have someone, Alex, who's being an idiot, who didn't consider all the motivations in favor of PMC. He knows there's more. He's been told there's more motivations, and he's just like, oh, induction, I don't care. I don't like induction. I want a reason. Induction is just like, induction. What do you mean you want a reason? Induction, bro. What are you saying? Then we got more reasons you didn't even ask for because you're hastily just like swiping away the argument. I don't know, because it's hard for you to grasp or it's abstract. I don't know. Then it's not just like, oh, if you reject this, you reject the Kalam's causal principle. No, it's that if you reject this, classical theism is false, right? It's not just the Kalam. If you reject PMC, classical theism is false. Why? Because if you reject this, then the very reason you give for rejecting that, you're going to reject the nihil fit principle. They're an epistemic par, the nihil fit and PMC. If you reject nihil fit, you get the result that classical theism is false. So it's not just like, the Kalam is kind of cool, so like an agnostic. No. They're on epistemic par. Reject one for the reasons Alex cited, or for plausibly for almost any reason you could give for rejecting PMC will apply. But that's a separate argument. Point is, case at hand, the reason he's citing for rejection of PMC is shit. But more than that, and will entail rejecting outfit, which entails classical theism is false. Yeah, get out of here.
I would definitely not put it any higher than it, because that means putting it on the level of evil God. We've already got evil God in C tier.
We didn't go over lots of my objections to the evil god challenge, so
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Like, what I'm thinking, mate, like I was gonna say, man, I was gonna say like possibly even F tier, which would make you cringe because like God Rock is on E. I was gonna say like maybe if we like shifted God Rock down to F, we could put it in E. I mean, if you really thought it belonged like in C, then maybe like D is a good compromise.
D
putting it
plus,
along
yeah,
with the
D plus, D is fine.
improvability argument and the universe big. Like,
Yeah, that's fair.
Is it as good as universe big? Okay, the universe is. Yeah, actually, yeah. Okay, fair play. Because yeah, it's sort of like there does seem to be this like cohesiveness to materialism, and like yeah, like stuff is made of matter, and matter interacts and does all this kind of stuff. Like that just seems to be the way of the universe, man. It seems weird that the universe itself wouldn't abide by those rules. Fair, yeah, fair enough. Okay, that's got something to it. I think D plus C minus. I mean, I think yeah, didn't we put evil God or improvability argument sort of halfway through as well? We said like did we say like D plus or something? So
Yeah, D plus.
Like,
I would say D plus.
Maybe D. I mean, would you want to push it up into C? Because if you really want to push it up to C, I'm sort of willing to consider it.
I'm fine with D plus. I'm fine with D plus.
Are you sure? I don't want to feel like I'm sort of just like laying down the law here. But I given that I sort of immediately thought this is like borderline F tier territory, I think D is quite a compromise already.
I think I'm just more attracted to like the dialectical efficacy of it. Just like that this is
Right, but that's not because of the mere fact that like justification is person based. It's not what's going on. You saw Alex not consider all the reasons, and you told him there were more reasons. You saw him not even ask for them. You saw him not really consider them. You saw him dismiss an inductive generalization for little to no reason. His suggestion has internal probabilistic tension, and rejecting PMC in this context entails rejecting null fit, which entails classical theism is false. So you have all those things on the table, and now you're going to say like, I just think I happen to find it better because of like the dialectical utility I think it has. No, I don't think that's the proper distinction here. I think if you weren't so nice, you would say that he's not being rational. He's not considering the full reasons in favor of the argument, the consequences that the argument entails. Yeah, no, I don't think this is just like, oh, I'm different because my background experience. Sometimes people are being irrational, and we don't need to pretend that they're not being irrational. We don't need to chalk it up to our mere differences. It's the irrationality that is the difference, not like mere biological, psychological differences. It's irrationality.
good for getting theists specifically to reflect a bit further on their beliefs and the parity between the column and this. So like if it were my ranking, I'd probably put it around C. But I think it's fine to put it D here, so long as it's like a D plus.
Yeah, okay. We'll call it a D plus then, if you like.
Okay.
Because
yes, that's fair.
I would just say, hey man, like fair enough. You think it's C, but if you think it's C and I think it's like F, then D plus feels like a relatively healthy compromise.
That's fair. D plus is fine.
Okay, well, we'll stick on the thing. But people listening, people watching, let us know what you think. Whose side are you on here? This argument. What did you call it?
The argument for material causality.
Material causality. I want people to tell me in the comments whose side. Those of you who, God bless you, are still with us. Please tell me whose side you're on here. Where does this belong?
To be a massive nitpicker, whose side you're on is false dichotomy. I'm on neither of your side. I think it's better than both of you are making it out to be. So, false dichotomy, get nitpicked. But I'm definitely, if I had to pick between you and Schmidt, I'm definitely not with you, buddy. I just witnessed you. I'm not going to repeat everything again, but just swatted away a huge inductive generalization with no exceptions. Oh, I need a reason. How about the full scale of our inductive experience to bring to bear in favor of the principle? I need like a reason, What are you doing? What are you talking? Yeah. What?
Well, if they're curious, again, check out Felipe Leon's article. So he goes into much more detail on it.
For sure.
But yeah, definitely check out Felipe Leon's article. Very, very good article. Also, you could find a good back and forth about this principle, the argument here in the book. It's called The Best Explanation of Things, because unlike Mr. O'Connor and Schmid, okay, I should cut him some slack. I guess he's just being nice. But Rasmussen does a very, very good job at fitting Felipe Leon's principle into his theistic worldview. So definitely check that out. All right, signing out. Peace out. Goodbye.